Hey there, the Games Apprentice here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Atari Collection on the EVERCADE. Is it a relic that should be left in the past, or is this one worth a double dunk? Atari Inc., founded in Sunnyvale, California in 1972 by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney. The company was a pioneer in arcade games, home video game consoles and home computers. In 1977, Atari launched the legendary Atari 2600. This was the first mass-market home console and sold over 30 million units. Atari played a major role in shaping the electronic entertainment industry in the 1970s to the mid-1980s. That's what the little manual says that comes with the game anyway. As far as the manuals go, it's nothing special, it's just the same stuff that you get on the game's launch screens, about, controls and the box art. I expect this to set the tone for future manuals, so unless there's anything drastically different going forward, I won't be talking about manuals in future EVERCADE reviews. These aren't cool special edition manuals, it's just a basic manual, which is what you'd expect for a £15 price point. The collection contains a whopping 20 games in total, and it's the biggest collection I've come across on the EVERCADE so far. 16 are from the Atari 2600, and the other 4 are from the Atari 7800. That's a lot to cover, so let's get cracking, going from worst to best. Let's get the crap out of the way first, and the worst of the worst of the worst is Yars Return. Yars Return is a follow-up to Yars Revenge. I've never played Yars Revenge, but if it's anything like Yars Return, it seems like Yar is getting his revenge by making you play what I imagine having a stroke feels like. When it comes to the Atari, you've got to be pretty forgiving when it comes to the graphics, but just look at it. There's nothing good to be said about this one. Next in the old crap bucket is Tempest. The original Tempest on the arcade is a fantastic game. It's fast, it's frantic, and it feels like something from the future if you currently live in 1981. This version, however, is a prototype that never actually got released, and it's not hard to see why. It takes everything that's good about the arcade version and flushes that down the toilet, and then you get this. The arcade version of Night Driver is fun. You've got a steering wheel that you use to drive at night. The home console version was never great, but it used the Atari dial well, so the gameplay still worked okay. However, the EVERCADE version is just awful. Obviously the EVERCADE has no dial control, so you've got to try and steer with the D-pad, and it simply doesn't work well at all. It's so difficult that you'll end up driving at a walking pace to have any hope of making it round a corner. Occasionally you'll pick up speed and think you're the man, but any good driving that does occur is clearly just plain luck. To make matters worse, when you crash, not if, when, and lots of whens, the game visually punishes you by painfully flashing and flickering. Again, another bad part of a decent arcade game. Steeplechase is a game for up to 4 players, where you must race for 3 minutes by jumping your horse over blocks. In this game, you basically just press one button, jump. It's all about timing the jump, and that's it. It's incredibly boring. You can't control the height and distance of your jump like you can in the arcade, and 3 minutes of this is just way too long. Crystal Castles is like some weird survival horror. You control a bear and you basically just have to stay alive until the level ends. You can pick up things for bonus points, and levels have infrequent elevators to raise you to a higher platform. The flicker of the sprites can be a bit enduring, and I personally didn't have much fun with this one. Double Dunk is an excellent name for a 2-on-2 basketball game. There's no denying that. Unfortunately, that's about as good as it gets with this one. I love sport games, but finding one from ye old times that still holds up is always tough. It seems like it could be fun, but it's just completely ruined by the sprite flicker. It's hard to see where you are or keep track of what's going on. Desert Falcon is impressive in terms of its technology for the time, considering what some of the games on here look like. It's an early look into an isometric shooter in which you're a falcon in, you've guessed it, the desert. You can fly low and high, as well as left and right, which feels impressive for the time. The aim is to collect, I want to guess, fossils or relics, while shooting things and not getting shot. This will eventually lead you to an absolutely solid boss fight. It's good for historical purposes, but it's not that much fun. Now, I'm a big fan of pinball, both the real thing and the video game, and there are two things that make up a good pinball game, and that's the ball physics and how interesting the table is. And for me, this game completely fails on both counts. The ball physics, or cube physics in this case, are just crazy. The ball bounces all over the place at seemingly random speeds, and the table is just so short and oddly shaped that it's hard to really do anything. Canyon Bomber is kind of fun. It's pretty chilled. You basically play the role of a person who presses the bomb drop button on a plane. It's an important role when you're trying to clear out a canyon, I guess. You gain points by the bombs going through as many coloured layers as possible, making your skills about timing and working on the trajectory. It does offer a 2-player mode, but no one in the right mind is going to want to play this game with me. Graphically, as you can see, this game is better than anything else that came before it on this list. This is because it's the first of the 4 Atari 7800 games. MotorPsycho is a decent, perfectly playable racer that probably did its best with the technology on offer at the time. It's got the unique ability of being able to jump that you don't often see in this genre, and it plays a lot like Super Hang-On or a Road Rash. Unfortunately, it doesn't really offer anything that hasn't been done much better before in other games. So unless you've never played an arcade racer like this before, you're probably going to find it pretty underwhelming and get bored pretty fast. So Adventure is a game I'd heard lots about but never played. I'm not sure if I'd heard good things, I'd just heard things. The title is a little bit misleading. It's less of an adventure game and more just a puzzle maze game. And personally for me, this game absolutely broke me. I got stuck, I got lost, and I was just stuck in an endless maze loop for what seemed like eternity, and I ended up rage quitting. Mazes are hard at the best of times, but when most of the screen just looks the same, it makes it really difficult. You're basically a cube that can pick up one object and needs to move through the level. I can imagine this was quite the hit when it came out. It's pretty unique, but it doesn't hold up that well. Aquaventure is a fairly fun arcade style game in which you need to dive to the bottom of the sea, pick up the treasure and return back up to the mermaid without running out of air. You've got a gun and there are some angry fish down there. Each time you kill a fish, it increases your score, but the fish comes back even faster. If the fish touch you or you don't make it back without running out of air, you die. It's a simple, challenging little game. The main problem with Aquaventure is that they chose to make the main character blue. As you can see, this makes it very difficult to almost impossible to see character on some of the levels. On the first level this isn't a problem, but once you get to the second level or below it becomes more of an issue. This is less of an issue on the EVERCADE handheld, but on the EVERCADE Versus it's borderline unplayable. Missile Command involves you taking control of multiple missiles and trying to use them to defend your bases from incoming missiles. What makes this game unique is the blast radius. You're not looking to shoot down the falling missiles, but you're trying to have them fall into your short-lived blast radius. Like Canyon Bomber, it's about timings and trajectory, but it's fast-paced and fun. It's hard not to be disappointed by the 2800 version of Missile Command, because the arcade version is such a classic. But even a subpar port of Missile Command is still a very fun game. It misses out on the visuals and fun controls of the arcade, but it's still explosively good fun. Another 7800 game, Ninja Golf, is one I'd heard of, but not at all what I expected. The concept is pretty amusing. You're a ninja trying to play a round of golf, but after you take your shot, on your way to the ball, you're attacked by a bunch of ninjas and creatures, and then when you get to the green, you have a boss fight. It's basically just a standard beat 'em up that uses golf as its premise. Sure, it can get pretty old pretty quick, but the visuals, premise and solid controls make it deserving of its position on this list. Centipede is a famous arcade game that I'd always assumed was some sort of Snake clone or vice versa, but in reality it's more like a Space Invaders clone. The Centipede makes its way down the screen and you need to shoot it, but just like a real Centipede, even if you chopped it to bits, its bits stay alive because centipedes are immortal. When it hits blocks it changes direction, making it tough to predict its movement, and you're also constantly being harassed by a spider. It's a fun game that made me want to check out the arcade version. Sword Quest feels like the follow-up to Adventure. It's got a very similar colour palette, but that could just be because it's an Atari game. You're basically a character in a maze that can pick up different items. What makes Sword Quest fun though are the levels you'll come across within the maze and how the items interact with them. Try and climbing up a ladder in an empty room and you keep falling down. Find the candle and you'll see the rooms filled with moving blocks that are stopping you. The only downside of Sword Quest is that the levels all seem to have some kind of moving blocks, and it's hard to figure out what item you need where. Still, it's a pretty unique game that's challenging and can be fun if you don't lose your mind. The third 7800 game, Food Fight, is another arcade port. It's certainly not as good as the arcade game as it lacks the pace. You basically control some kid who's trying to start a fight with a bunch of chefs who aren't too best pleased, and if they touch you, they kill you. It's a score-based game, and you're scored for hitting the chefs with bananas and pies, and can end the level by eating the cone. It's kind of like an early twin-stick shooter, but without the twin sticks. Now, I absolutely love Asteroids. I grew up on what I thought was Asteroids, but later found out it was an Acorn clone called Meteors. We also had Snapper instead of Pac-Man and Croaker instead of Frogger. FYI, Croaker is greater than Frogger. In Asteroids, you control a little ship that can only fly in the direction it's facing, and you have to clear the screen of the asteroids with your tiny pea shooter of a gun. You only fire so many bullets at once, and when you hit an asteroid, it splits off into smaller asteroids, giving you more things on the screen to avoid. One of the most fun parts of Asteroids is how the ship handles. Your momentum carries you, meaning that you can spin around and shoot in other directions while still floating across the screen. Its gameplay is addictive, and although this version isn't the best, the colours are unnecessary and there's no spaceships to shoot at you, it's still a really fun game. If you've ever come across an Asteroids arcade machine and you see TGA on the top scoreboard, that's probably me. The final 7800 game on the list just misses out on the top spot. Alien Brigade is quite literally a blast. It plays basically like a light gun shooter, but using the D-pad to control the rectile, and it's a lot of fun. Visually it looks great and the gameplay is just more fun than it has any right to be. Score chasing is challenging, as is not accidentally hitting those hostages. You have a finite number of bullets so you can't just go crazy, and hitboxes either seem to be very generous or I am awesome. For me, Gravitar is easily the best game on this list. It's just got so much more to offer than anything else. Now, I'd never heard of this game before, and when I first booted it up, I thought it was just an Asteroids clone, but with a gravitational pull. There was just me and one ship, so it felt like an endless dogfight. Then I accidentally crashed into a planet, and that's when I discovered the planets weren't obstacles to avoid, but they were levels. Some involved you shooting down ground cannons, and others were just narrow paths that you had to navigate. The whole time you're battling against or making use of the gravitational pull within the levels, making controlling the ship really tricky but really satisfying. It's not too punishing either. You're not game overed when you die, which is great because I crashed a lot. You can keep going until you run out of fuel, which you pick up more of, but manoeuvring your ship to do this is a whole new challenge. Gravitar is the must-play game on this cart. Overall, the Atari Collection one is a mixed bag, and it's got several games that I'd much rather play at the arcade ports. Asteroids, Centipede, Missile Command, Crystal Castles, Canyon Bomber, and Night Driver are all on the Atari Arcade 1. If, however, you're interested in the excellent Gravitar and Alien Brigade, the Atari Collection 1 comes with that, plus 18 other games, half of which are decent, which isn't bad for £15. The EVERCADE Atari Collection 1 is by no means an essential purchase, but it is a good solid collection, and I'm going to score it 7 out of 10. You've been watching the Games Apprentice. Don't forget to click subscribe for more EVERCADE reviews, and I'll catch you next time.